Hello everyone, today's love story, I tell you, will not be about a rich young master and some innocent princess, not a muscular student with a stupid little girl. If you expect such a fairy tale, then you will be disappointed today. I just want to tell you about a couple of little lovers who lean on each other in the middle of a harsh and cold city. Life is not as dreamy as we dream. Warning, videos with content that is not appropriate for children. Please watch your kids carefully. Cyberspace can sometimes be really toxic. A few weeks ago, Hyun-soo accidentally caught this cute creature on the street. That day, Hyun-soo woke up when it was already dark. She heard the alarm call her to get up to work, so she woke up, looked out the window outside. The snow was so heavy. This year the winter was colder. Hyun-soo is a fairly freelance work-from-home person who lives in a rented room, lacking discipline like many other modern young people. Hyun-soo opened his phone to read the warning of heavy snowfall. The temperature outside was very low. She lazily put on more clothes and went outside. Knowing it was so cold, she put on more underwear. Hyun-soo goes out to buy some beer and snacks. She walked as she pulled her towel and jacket back to shield herself from the cold wind. Suddenly she met a young man cowering in a small corner, in the dim streetlights and snowfall. If it hadn't been for her walking slowly and watching, no one would have noticed someone freezing to death there. Hyun-soo uses all her strength to help him home. Her home is quite close, and she can't leave him outside like that. He hasn't fainted enough to let her call an ambulance. It was a stranger, a young man, maybe a tramp, a drug addict, a murderer, a pervert. But the desperate eyes he looked up at her then, made her take risks to help. Something makes Hyun-soo lament and decide to protect. When Hyun-soo was able to guide him to his room, his whole body was almost numb, in his flimsy clothes in the cold. She immediately flushed hot water into the tub, helping him into a dip. The young man was almost exhausted, unable to speak much. He even fell on the bathroom floor, his limbs numb, and Hyun-soo had to use a faucet and a large cup to scoop hot water to warm his body. Although she was also very embarrassed by his condition of wearing nothing, but now his health is so weak, if he does not warm up in time, he will have to cut necrotic parts from the cold. His body was so cold that as soon as he poured warm water on him, he cried out, "Hot, so hot." Hyun-soo has to encourage him to try until his limbs can move. Hyun-soo struggled to splash warm water so that he also got all his clothes wet from the splashing water, his clothes sticking to her. After a while, Hyun-soo told him to get up and go to the bathtub to soak for a while. She prepared bath oil for him. Even the loosest clothes she bought by mistake last time also lent it to him. Ji-hyo felt embarrassed that he had been treated so well for the first time, and being naked again, he took a shower and coming back to his senses. When Ji-hyo came back, Hyun-soo changed into a new outfit and watched TV on the only bed in the cramped room, worried that the building's roof might collapse due to record snowfall in decades. Hyun-soo looked at the clothes she gave him, which looked funny short. Ji-hyo was sitting very far away from her. He was always scared of it all. Hyun-soo looked at him. She just thought it was a shy boy. He seemed to have just been beaten. Earlier when she poured hot water on him, she had seen the wounds old and new. She got off the bed, got him a small blanket to cover, and found medicine to apply to his wounds. She dabbed an antiseptic and then ointment on the scratches on his face, then bandaged them for him. Ji-hyo was shy and scared at first, but later became less vigilant, making it easier for her to handle her injuries. "Do you want some cocoa?" Ji-hyo did not answer. Hyun-soo understood that he was seriously hurt and was embarrassed about her help at the moment. She still decided to take good care of him. She has been living alone for 4 years. Suddenly another person appears in her room. Hyun-soo feels a little happy. Suddenly from behind, the young man stood up, leaned down to kiss her, with only a very light touch of the lips. "What are you doing?" Hyun-soo asked. He replied to thank you for helping me. "Is that your way to return the favor?" Hyun-soo surprised. "If that's probably not enough, let's make love. I'll be gentle, Ji-hyo hugged Hyun-soo's waist lightly, said softly. His tone was devoid of emotion, the way he touched her was bland and reluctant. Hyun-soo felt a little disinterested, she didn't need that kind of thanks. She pulled up the zipper of her jacket, put her hand on Ji-hyo's cheek and patted her lightly as if coaxing a child who had just made a mistake, smiled and said, "Thank you, that's enough. No matter how excited you are, sleeping with one person is impossible. It is also important to protect yourself. With these sexually contagious diseases," Hyun-soo candidly expresses his opinion, despite Ji-hyo's explanation that he does not have the disease. "You too, protect yourself. Don't try to do it when you don't want to." Hyun-soo said seriously, "I'm not trying to pick up a handsome young man to do something, it's moral behavior." Hyun-soo asks him if he wants something to eat, but he refuses. Then she takes out a small box of cakes from the fridge and gives it to him. Although it is a little cold, but dipped with hot cocoa, it can be eaten temporarily. Ji-hyo obediently followed. He apologized for making her uncomfortable earlier. He didn't think anyone would save him out of kindness, and no need for anything in return. The two sat and chatted for a while. Hyun-soo smiled and said, "You don't need to be afraid, although I am quite fat, I am still a woman, so the one who has to be afraid must be me, you just relax." Ji-hyo was confused, thinking in her mind, she looks so small, she is not big, she looks cute like a cat. Hyun-soo asks if he can contact his family members. Ji-hyo shook his head, nobody, after thinking for a few seconds said he was going to sleep at work. Hyun-soo is experienced and subtle to recognize the problem. If he had a place to sleep, what would he be doing on the streets? "You have to sleep here tonight, it's going to snow all night, and your freshly washed clothes won't be dry." Hyun-soo prepares blankets and cushions for him on the floor, and the first night together starts like that. In the darkness, the two ask for each other's names. Hyun-soo says he is 28 years old, and Ji-hyo with his handsome face makes her think that he is not yet 18 years old, it turns out to be 23 years old. In the dream, scary memories constantly surround Ji-hyo. In the dream the childhood scene he once endured is recreated. His mother was a beautiful young girl after taking drugs. She sat on top of a stranger, enjoying lust. The room was full of food and drink indiscriminately. After a moment the man with a fierce face walked up and opened the door, found a trembling boy hiding in the closet. He laughed, "See, I found this mouse." The sight of the man scared Ji-hyo to scream and wake up. Hyun-soo wakes up from his screams, gets off the bed and asks how he is doing. Ji-hyo didn't say anything, her sad face made her nervous, wondering if he had some brain injury. She asked Ji-hyo anxiously for a while, then sat down next to him, brushing the strands of hair in front of his forehead with her hand. How beautiful and pitiful he looked. The next morning, Ji-hyo was about to return to work, when heavy snow again paralyzed traffic. Hyun-soo stops him from going out on the street in this weather, advising him to call and ask for a break from work today. But Ji-hyo doesn't need permission to take time off, because the bar he works as a waitress doesn't open during the day. Hyun-soo said that he needed to apply medicine to the wounds all over the other person, but Ji-hyo refused, which made her quite annoyed, decisively dragged his hand inside the room. Even if he didn't use it, the medicine would expire, take advantage of it. This argument of hers made Ji-hyo unable to refuse anymore. Hyun-soo opens his personal medicine box and applies medicine, changing his dressing, in the most wholehearted way. When he was next to Hyun-soo's face, he blushed shyly. Hyun-soo teased him, "You were so strong last night and now you're embarrassed?" She asked him what to eat and then prepared breakfast. They couldn't go out because of the heavy snow everywhere, and would have breakfast at home. Ji-hyo says thank you to her, most sincerely, but Hyun-soo asks for another return, which is washing dishes after they finish eating. While Ji-hyo cleans up the kitchen area, Ji-hyo gets to work, sitting on the bed staring at the screen, listening to a few phone calls. Hyun-soo finished and obediently sat next to her and watched her, like a silent rat looking from a cave to the outside world. A few hours later, bad news for Hyun-soo was that someone drove his car into a utility pole and caused a power outage in the entire apartment. The heating ran on her own electricity, but it was still very cold and she would need an electric blanket and heater to get warm enough in such weather, which was scary, would be cold. Hyun-soo, irritated that she kicked the stack of books on the ground. Bad enough, what kind of obnoxious mess would make a mess? That person was Hyun-soo. Her legs hurt when she stepped on the hard book covers, screaming. Ji-hyo rushed to pick her up, asking if she was okay. It's almost the end of the second day. Ji-hyo still can't go to work because the snow is still thick and is continuing to fall. The bar probably has no customers. He will continue to stay here tonight. And Hyun-soo is spreading the blanket on the floor, which is near the heating system and away from drafts. Ji-hyo asked if he was going to sleep in bed tonight. But Hyun-soo says they will sleep on the floor together, and he can rest assured that she won't do anything. This was a rather urgent case, so they could temporarily forget the usual rules of behavior between two strangers. Hyun-soo handed him a pair of her socks. Ji-hyo seems more accustomed to the cold than a little girl. He is both a man and used to being abandoned in the cold since he was a child. Watching Hyun-soo cower from the cold, Ji-hyo offers to get closer to her, adding a little warmth from her body that would probably be more pleasant for Hyun-soo. Hyun-soo didn't speak, chained close to him, slipped into his arms. They covered both blankets together, and obviously it was warmer. With her small body, her head was only as tall as Ji-hyo's chest, and she could clearly hear his confused heartbeat. Hyun-soo teases him until the two fall asleep, and they lie down together since they don't know. Until midnight, Ji-hyo screams again and is plagued by tormenting nightmares. His eyes widened, seeing Hyun-soo sitting next to him, holding his face with his hand. At this time, Ji-hyo was not really awake. He pushed her hand away, scaredly crying out, "Stay away from me, don't touch me." Ji-hyo cringed in fear, her hands wrapped around her head and nestled in a corner. Hyun-soo touches him and is about to comfort him, when suddenly Ji-hyo pins her to the ground, asking if she wants him to do it. No matter what he asked for during the lovemaking, he could do it, as he said, tears falling from Ji-hyo's transparent eyes onto Hyun-soo's face. She was brushing him over to sit up when her knees touched between his legs slightly, a large hard mass just jetting up. They both shyly sat up. Ji-hyo came to her senses. They were both shy about what had happened. Hyun-soo apologizes for asking him to sleep together. She still thinks that he is just a boy, because of his immature face. Ji-hyo apologized to her for bothering her like that. Hyun-soo slowly approached him, hugged him and comforted him. Ji-hyo talks about his nightly life, nights spent serving ladies on demand, in exchange for a place to sleep, and money. And last night when she met him sitting in the street, it was when he had just served a lady at her house, and her husband caught him, beat him like that, and luckily he escaped. That terrified him. A child who has witnessed all the disgust before his eyes since childhood, until he grows up still living in the trauma of this cold world, his story makes Hyun-soo truly sympathetic. Hyun-soo caresses Ji-hyo's face, letting him cry freely. For a moment, she cupped his face with both hands, seriously asking, "Do you want to do that to me? I'm not in good shape, but I think I can make you enjoy it. If you don't like it, you can say it. I'm not going to kick you out for it." While Ji-hyo was stunned by this suggestion, Hyun-soo pushed him lightly to the floor, placed his hand on his chest and stroked, then peeled off his t-shirt. "It's cold, sorry, let's warm up a bit." Without any relation, Hyun-soo continued what he wanted. She knelt one leg between Ji-hyo's thighs, bent down and started kissing him from Ji-hyo's ear and neck. She whispered, "I'm a lonely person, it feels cold, and having two people would probably be warmer." Despite Ji-hyo staring at her blankly, Hyun-soo moved closer to him, hugged him, stroked his long, soft hair, stroked down his back, and moved to his chest, lightly fondling two tiny knobs filled with sensitive tactile nerve endings. Ji-hyo was completely paralyzed, and he groaned helplessly. Hyun-soo laughed, taking off her shirt, her body making Ji-hyo completely mesmerized. Your lips are torn so I won't be able to kiss properly. Hyun-soo mischievously leaned down, touching her lips lightly to Ji-hyo's. Her breasts were also touching his, soft and warm. While Hyun-soo wants to bend over, Ji-hyo tries to remove her. She then used her shirt, wrapped it around his arms, and placed it on top of her head, continuing her journey to discover the soul of the young man beneath her. Hyun-soo sat on Ji-hyo's stomach, bent down to lick the two tiny spots on his chest, making him moan softly, the first sensation he felt in 23 years. Hyun-soo's dexterity and boldness are great. She dips a little saliva with her hand and courts Ji-hyo's other side. He was both curious and longing, lying still waiting, sometimes trembling from this strange feeling. Hyun-soo removed more of their pants, and she sat back down a little, in the right position, gently moving, her hands still busy caressing his sad face and body. Suddenly, she took off the shirt wrapped around Ji-hyo's wrist, put it back on, and the game was over. She simply confirmed to Ji-hyo that he wasn't terrified of it, just that he had never been loved, so he didn't know how to love someone else. And they continued to lie down and sleep until morning. The blizzard seems to have subsided, but Hyun-soo says he can stay if there is no other shelter. The modern frog prince came to her in such a pathetic form. They lived in the same house as civilized as possible. Hyun-soo takes care of living expenses for both of them, while Ji-hyo does all the housework. Of course he still works. One day, Hyun-soo lazily woke up, answered a friend's phone inviting her to his studio to work. This liberal girl did not want to work outside, she quickly refused the offer, and she turned off the power of her phone. Moments later, Ji-hyo came running back from work, worried about not being able to contact her. They grumbled at each other for a few sentences, and then slipped into the blankets together. Ji-hyo is sleepy because she just finished her night shift, and Hyun-soo is still sleepy. Hyun-soo sat next to him, pinching her cheeks and watching him, her face so beautiful that she couldn't help but be amused. She touched Ji-hyo's chest, felt his heart rate increasing, whispered in his ear, "If you don't open your eyes you will be kissed," said, and then without waiting for 3 seconds, she leaned down on his face and kissed him. "It's to mark my recent recovery from illness," Hyun-soo explained her behavior, while Ji-hyo looked at her wide-eyed. Successfully seducing, Ji-hyo pushed her to lie down. He propped his hands on her head, softly asked, "Is your body still weak? Can you bear it?" His expression was quite apprehensive, although his body trembled a little. Hyun-soo touched between his legs, teasing, "What is worrying is not my health." Ji-hyo couldn't control it anymore, started removing his clothes, and following a man's instincts. It wasn't the first time they'd done it together. A week after the blackout happened, everything was fixed. That day Hyun-soo said that they didn't need to sleep together anymore, which made Ji-hyo a little frustrated. At that moment, he saw that the condom in his pants pocket was placed on the table, which Hyun-soo removed when doing the laundry. Hyun-soo asked if he was going to use that with her. After a tortuous moment, Ji-hyo admits that he no longer serves the ladies, and that the condoms he bought are as a backup. Hyun-soo immediately flirts with him, insisting on using all those condoms. But she was quite surprised, it was actually too big for her imagination. In contrast to Ji-hyo's thin body, his sword was huge. Ji-hyo only used up the first one condom, which caused her to expend all her energy on moaning and contracting all the muscles in her body. The two were tired and hugged each other to sleep like that. The weeks passed so peacefully. Between two strangers, there was no need to learn about each other's past. The poor boy had transformed into a gorgeous boy, albeit a little thin. He had just gone out to buy some things and put them in the fridge. "Where are you going, Ji-hyo?" asked Hyun-soo, sprawled in a blanket, sticking out her head to ask him, her expression still sleepy. She wasn't wearing anything, she still liked it, because it was comfortable. Besides, after they had taken off their clothes to sleep last night, they were too tired to sleep in that state. "Instant noodles? Did you buy spicy ones? Do you buy a beer?" Hyun-soo asked lazily. "No, I forgot, let me go buy it," Ji-hyo said. Okay, Hyun-soo waved her hand, eat it, and she lay flat on her face relaxed from a nap. There were still red marks on her neck from last night. Yes, Ji-hyo said confused. He struggled to unlock the lock of his jacket. It was a little damp from the snow outside, and his hands were a little cold, so he struggled to pull it off. Bend over here and I pull for help. Hyun-soo suddenly opened his eyes and gestured. I can do it myself, Ji-hyo said shyly. It's been a long time, Hyun-soo insisted to help. Yes, he always maintained the most polite attitude to answer Hyun-soo. I'm very good at undressing you, Hyun-soo laughed wickedly, pulling him down. Indeed, the lock was stuck. It took Hyun-soo a moment to take it off. Hyun-soo teased Ji-hyo like, this seems like I'm a bit seducing you, doesn't it? Ji-hyo shyly made her even more interested in teasing. Or am I not doing well? She laughed. Ji-hyo was even more embarrassed. No, it's no good, you're amazing. Stop teasing me, he pleaded. Successfully trapping him, Hyun-soo opens the blanket and motions for him to lie down with him. You like being teased by me, don't you? Come here. And she pulled Ji-hyo's face down close to hers. How can a lively guy restrain his instincts in this situation? She was always strong and hot, driving him crazy. That soft body he had kissed was nowhere to be found. So seductive that Ji-hyo is embarrassed by her overwhelming desire. What's wrong, Ji-hyo? Am I supposed to be the one to be ashamed of? Laughed Hyun-soo, placing her hand on his neck. This young man made her feel very safe. Ji-hyo looked at Hyun-soo's sparkling eyes in front of him, both enthralled and sad. He was just afraid that this dream would dissipate. It's cold outside, huh? Your body is so cold. Hyun-soo stroked his skin, decisively removed his jacket, pulled it into the blanket, used her body to warm up. Feet are cold too. She rubbed his legs with her feet. It's okay to raise the temperature of the electric blanket a bit, Hyun-soo said and hugged Ji-hyo, eyes closed, enjoying the familiar feeling. Sleep well, Ji-hyo. They just lay lazily enjoying each other's warmth. Ji-hyo secretly thought that if winter lasted forever, it would be good. He could hide in this room with her forever. But life for low-income young people is not easy. In a short time, Hyun-soo had to strictly control his spending. In the past, her income was temporary, and her older sister, who was 11 years her senior in the countryside, sometimes gave her something to help ease her needs. But now there is Ji-hyo with her. Electricity, gas, water, food are inflated. Just relying on doing a few extra jobs online won't be enough to cover much longer. Hyun-soo sighed thoughtfully. Under money pressure, she almost agreed to go to work at her best friend's studio. But she didn't want that job. An undisciplined person like her would have a hard time adapting to following other people's orders, especially the artwork she was passionate about. Hyun-soo is not an idealist. She is passionate and gifted with photography, but taking commercial photos makes her depressed, often clashing with customers. So she quit her job at the studio, despite her friend begging her to come work for him. Today, after meeting her older sister, Hyun-soo is also quite upset because she was scolded by her older sister. Her job and accommodation are so bad now. Her sister asked her if she ran away from home to the city to attend college and made such a long effort in return. And Ji-hyo's recent times have also been very bad. With good looks, he works at the old bar and is often beaten by both colleagues and customers. Even a cheap prostitute who had sex with her a few times in exchange for a place to sleep was harassing him, because he didn't see Ji-hyo wandering outside anymore. He didn't receive any other women. And today she hit Ji-hyo with a broom. New and old wounds kept appearing. Ji-hyo came home at 3 a.m. this morning, to Hyun-soo's surprise. She nervously asked him if he was okay. Ji-hyo just sadly didn't say anything. He sat cowering in a corner, his face bewildered like an abandoned animal. That made Hyun-soo lament. His lifeless gaze never had the light of the future. The future with a fatherless child. His mother took drugs and committed suicide when he was in high school, after which he was abused, beaten, homeless and miserable until now. his education does not give him a brighter job choice, that future doesn't exist. It was only in these few weeks that he felt the first bit of warmth of humanity and love. His heart warmed a little, his eyes took on a slightly brighter shade. Ji-hyo is like a little animal who was born and meets Hyun-soo, and considers it everything. Hyun-soo now sat near him, observing his sad expression. She decided to capture those moments. When she showed off her camera film and her long unused camera to Ji-hyo, he was surprised and curious. Hyun-soo is the type of person who used to have desire and effort, then got tired and withdrawn, and Ji-hyo has never seen sunlight. The light in his life is reflected through her eyes. His eyes looked dreamily, imagining what she had gone through. The thoughts passing in his eyes made the shade of his face change slightly, and those moments were captured by Hyun-soo in the most perfect and realistic way. Our story is here for now. We will continue reading it as soon as the new chapter is released. Thank you for listening. Remember to like and follow the channel. Thank you very much. See you in the next video.